Is China going to ban otome games? What's true, what's false? Hi, I'm Spokinette, and I'm a French streamer who's been racking my brain trying to debunk and combat misinformation on social media regarding news about love and deep space, or hate and depression to those in the know. Lol. Let's get started. Following the CCTV report on underage girls' addiction to otome or gacha games that aren't age appropriate and how to prevent these risks, a lot of unnecessary concerns have surfaced in the lads community, leading to the following question: will otome games be banned in China? We are going to debunk all of this. Having watched the entire CCTV report, here's what it was really about. The journalists used lads as their main example, pointing out that an otome game intended for adults, rated PEGI 18, and that there's already a system in place to prevent minors from accessing it through ID verification. They interviewed a mother whose 13-year-old daughter borrowed her ID card without her permission to log into lads. The girl also spent a significant amount of money onto the game, including on merchandise. The report explains that without parental supervision, this exposes them to risk of addiction, whether related to spending, given that it's a gacha system, or to emotional attachment, given that's an otome game. There's also the fact that they are exposed to content that could be disturbing, including nudity and sexual innuendo. They also address issues such as the purchase of accounts already registered under an adult's identity that are being sold so children can access the game and else. In fact, at the end of the report, the mother concluded that she would try to spend more time with her daughter, plan outings with her, and grow closer to her instead of leaving her alone with her devices and other things. The journalists emphasized the importance of parental supervision and parents' responsibility to protect their children from content on social media that is inappropriate for them. The solutions being considered include a parental approach that involves parent-child dialogue to explain why certain content isn't yet appropriate for them. And on the corporate side, strengthening or even modifying age verification systems to prevent minors from circumventing the rules for adult games. So why all the panic following this report? Exaggerated reactions simply because they mentioned lads, misunderstandings and misinterpretation of the video, and links to topics such as the law banning AI companions or the limits of gaming time in China, all aimed at creating a climate of fear. And we'll come back to that in the part 2. So I'm going to explain why China can't ban otome games. The Sina article reminds us that the Chinese video game market is on the rise, with a 13.38% increase in the first quarter of 2026 alone. Since otome games are primarily played on mobile devices, it's also important to note that mobile games accounted for approximately 45% of China's video game market in 2024, generating $32.7 billion. Even though consoles are catching up, and studios must now offer hybrid solutions. Specifically regarding otome games, in 2024, this market generated 8 billion yuan, or approximately $1 billion, which represents a 124.1% increase compared to the previous year. Given this information, it's therefore unthinkable to ban otome games in China, especially since it is a growing market that generates significant revenue. There is also the fact that, as lads has already demonstrated, these games contribute to the global reach and promotion of Chinese culture. And finally, we must not forget that there are also plenty of otome games in Japan. Given the current situation, you're probably already aware that, historically speaking, China and Japan don't get along very well. So, if China were to ban otome games, it would be like rolling out the red carpet for their Japanese competitors, which is also unthinkable. Based on these three major reasons alone, the likelihood that China will ban otome games is extremely low. As you probably already know, Chinese laws governing the video games industry are very restrictive and complicated. Studios must comply with regulations and make modifications in order to release their games in China. As mentioned earlier, some people are panicking and using certain facts to fuel their anxiety. Let's start with the argument about restrictions on minors. In 2019, China passed a law to limit screen time spent on video games in order to protect minors from potential addiction. In 2021, this law was strengthened with stricter time limits. And while this certainly led to a decline in the number of minors playing video games, the consequences went far beyond simply regulating minors in this sector. China stopped issuing licenses for new games, and as a result of this freeze for new licenses, 14,000 video game studios were forced to close their doors, while others had to lay off employees, leading to a significant financial collapse in China. Ultimately, in terms of effectively keeping minors as far away as possible from video game addiction, it wasn't a huge success either, since these restrictions gave rise to a black market where game accounts registered under adults' names were sold to minors, allowing them to continue playing beyond the imposed limits. And this also mirrors the current situation with lads. Restrictions on minors playing games rated 18+, and efforts to prevent this infamous black markets. So why are some people using this law in connection with the unfold situation? It's to draw a connection by showing that, under the pretext of protecting minors, they are going to impose massive restrictions on video games. And so the argument has partly boiled down to they are going to ban otome games. But what these people haven't told you is that since 2023, video game studios in China have been bouncing back and finding ways to avoid having to shut down or lay off a large number of people. In fact, major publishers like Tencent and large video game studios have begun relocating some of their operations to Singapore and elsewhere, for example, to allow them to continue releasing a version of their games that meets China's criteria for their Chinese audience, and a version designed to appeal internationally and thus enjoy greater creative freedom. In this way, they can combine the two and contribute to the global reach of Chinese culture, which only serves to benefit them even more. In the meantime, there has been a boom in generative AI, which is having a huge impact on many sectors, including video games, and in which China is one of the biggest United States competitors. For the information, China used this AI to reduce cost of productions and publish more video games faster. I've included some very interesting articles about it in the description. So, given what we've just learned, it goes without saying that China is not going to ban otome games right away, since, as we saw in part 1, the video game market is once again expanding, and otome games play a very important part in it, especially on an international scale, to highlight all of China's positive aspects. Next, the second argument used by people on social media is that China is going to ban otome games because they prevent the Chinese birth rate from increasing. You really have to stay calm in this world. The argument cited is that China has banned AI companion for this reason, and we're going to debunk that as well. So, this is a very recent development as it pertains to July 15, 2026, the official date for the suspension of the following types of companions. Virtual companions, chatbots equipped with artificial intelligence and a stable personality, digital assistants capable of responding to emotions, as well as any platform designed to forge bonds similar to those we establish with other human beings. In fact, it's not really an official ban, it's a stricter restriction, but these restrictions and new regulations are hindering the growth of certain companies in the AI sector, so many of them are seeing their operations suspended. So, this decision didn't come out of nowhere. As as it follows reports of incidents involving teenagers who ended up developing an overly strong emotional dependence on their AI companion. In one notable case, a teenage girl was hospitalized for depression because an update temporarily deactivated her AI companion, whom she considered her boyfriend. This also applies to adults, as there's another reason behind it: to encourage relationships with real humans in order to continue procreation. And we'll come back to this topic of procreation in part 3. Obviously, these recent suspensions will also impact the country's economy. That goes without saying, so it remains to be seen what solutions they will consider to address this problem. So, will this serve as a reason to ban otome games in the future? No. I know that one connection these people make is that both otome games and AI companions raise concerns about emotional dependence. Except that we can't put otome games on the same level as AI companions. Emotional dependence is far higher with AI companions than with otome games, because AI companions are 100% customizable, unlike otome games. With AI companions, you can give them a personality, ensuring they're the perfect companion that meets all your needs, who always finds the right words to reassure you about your fears, anxieties, and current thoughts. In short, an ideal companion with no flaws, unlike a real human being. Their purpose is to develop a genuine, deep emotional bond and help combat loneliness, basically to be our personal assistant in everyday life. Imagine having a perfect companion who meets all your criteria, who listens to you and understands you all the time, and who is always available whenever you need them 24/7. When it comes to otome games, it's a completely different story. The purpose of otome games isn't specifically to provide daily assistance, but simply to be a game. And that's the key point some people overlook. Otome games are first and foremost games, designed primarily for entertainment. And the love interests we have in each otome games aren't 100% customizable like AI companions. They are lines of code with personalities imposed by the developers. That's actually why there are love interests that we really like and others we don't like at all. And remember, each of them also have flaws, something that doesn't exist in AI companions. This is also why in otome games we tend to favor one ally over another, or choose several, or switch allies along the way. Because as new allies appear, the compatibility between their predefined personalities and our own will vary. So, fundamentally, we can't compare otome games and AI companions, because they aren't designed to serve the same purposes, nor do they involve the same level of emotional dependence. Remember that otome games are games, not virtual assistants. So no, China isn't going to ban otome games outright, and certainly not for the same reasons as AI companions. Let's now turn to the topic of birth rates and emotional dependence. First of all, it's important to remember that emotional dependence doesn't exist only in relation to digital companions, for example, but also, and above all, in relation to other human beings, whether in romantic relationships, family relationships, or friendships. What is emotional dependency? Emotional dependency is defined as the psychological inability to exist on one's own or for one's own sake. It stems from low self-esteem or lack of self-confidence, which fosters self-doubt, fear, and uncertainty, and may have its roots in childhood or as a result of a trauma. External factors, such as otome games and AI companions, just to stay on topic, though they are by no means the only ones, are not the cause of emotional dependency, but simply a means of alleviating the distress caused by emotional dependency that is already present in the person. pay close attention to this distinction. Would removing these factors cure emotional dependency? The answer is obviously no. It's something that can be treated by consulting at least a psychologist, since, as seen in the definition, the root cause is trauma. Combined with this, the extremely developed parasocial dynamic within any fandom, especially right now, means that some people do indeed need real psychological and medical care, because this combination gives rise to extreme thoughts and actions that harm the community and above all themselves. Now, regarding the declining birth rate, this isn't something that affects only China, but practically every country in the world. Let's remember that in my country, France, our dear president had the brilliant idea to send a letter to 29-year-olds to combat infertility and, at the same time, revive the birth rate initiative. We are exhausted. So how can we explain such a sharp decline in the birth rate, especially among our generation? It's simple, you just have to listen to people. There are a huge number of factors contributing to this. Here are a few. The simple fact that some people choose not to have children because it's not something they want to do, and that's okay. Climate change, which is making living conditions worse for future generations, and for which not many people seem willing to find solutions to slow it down. Economic crises that make it hard enough to make ends meet for ourselves, let alone with a child to support. The societal context, where it's very difficult to find a partner to live with and start a family, particularly due to the regression in attitudes toward women, the rise of masculinism, and the increase in violence and crimes that go unpunished. That's starting to add up a lot of significant factors that discourage many people from having children, in addition to those who are already infertile. It's no coincidence that so many people have found refuge in AI companions. In fact, it points to something even deeper. Will China's further restrictions on the use of these AI companions help increase the country's birth rate? No. It won't solve this problem, which has been deeply rooted in society for a very long time. And this is true in every country around the world. For the birth rate to rise again, we would need to address the social conditions in which we live. And that doesn't happen overnight. It takes years and years of a government working to improve all of the conditions that I mentioned earlier. Yes, once again, everything is political. Furthermore, forcing the population to have children under current conditions will only increase rates of rape and domestic violence by disguising them under the pretext of this so-called need to boost the birth rate, which is extremely dangerous, especially for women. And yes, this issue will primarily affect, for the most part, women and minorities, who are the targets of society's worst atrocities. So while implementing prevention programs and other measures to reduce emotional dependence is certainly a good thing in itself, it will never be the solution to enabling a population to live better, feel more comfortable in their own skin, and feel safe. And finally, do we have any influence over the Chinese government? No, but we do have influence over our own governments. So let's continue to fight to build a better future for ourselves and for future generations. Let's keep mobilizing and making our voices heard to prevent further suffering. To conclude this video, China is not going to ban otome games for any reason whatsoever. There are far too many factors and reasons why doing so would not be in their strategic interest. So, rest assured, and above all, don't listen to people who tend to spread overly pessimistic or alarmist rhetoric on social media right now. These people usually take snippets of news, take them out of context, or twist them to their advantage just to get a brief moment of fame online and boost their stats. Remember that it's only by staying realistic and as objective as possible that we'll get through this. Obviously, it goes without saying that we'll continue the boycott until Infold officially announces that they are bringing Valco back without any changes into the game. Take care of yourself and don't fall for the misinformation circulating within the lads community. It's everywhere, so stay vigilant. Read every shared articles for yourselves and don't rely on short summaries that may be biased. Just only verified and official information. Let's avoid falling into the traps set by the haters. Stay strong, everyone. Don't give up. We'll get there. We're stronger when we stick together. And above all, don't forget to show that love is always stronger than hate. Take care of yourselves, big hugs, and let's bring Valko home. Bye bye!